The morning started like any other Tuesday at the Global Contact Center. Dr. Lisa Martinez walked through the glass corridors, her coffee still steaming in the white ceramic mug she'd been using for 3 years. She had no idea that today would change everything she thought she knew about their alien visitor. Ambassador Kell had been living on Earth for almost 3 years now. The tall, graceful being from the distant planet Veridon had become something of a celebrity among the scientists and diplomats who worked at the center. With their smooth, pearl-like skin that seemed to glow softly in certain light, Kale looked almost human, except for the slight blue tint to their skin and eyes that reminded everyone they were definitely not from around here. Lisa had grown fond of the ambassador during their weekly meetings. Kale was curious about human culture, always asking thoughtful questions about everything from how humans celebrated birthdays to why people kept pets. In return, Kale shared fascinating stories about life on Veridon, where cities floated among the clouds and people could live for over 300 years. But today felt different somehow. When Kale walked into the meeting room, something was off. The ambassador moved more carefully than usual, like someone trying not to show they were in pain. Lisa noticed immediately, because she'd been studying alien biology for most of her career, and small changes never escaped her attention. "Good morning, Ambassador," Lisa said with her usual warm smile. "How are you feeling today?" Kale paused for just a moment long before answering. "I'm well, thank you, Dr. Martinez. Shall we begin our discussion about the trade proposals?" As they settled into their chairs around the polished wooden table, Lisa couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Kale kept their arms crossed, which was unusual. Normally, the ambassador used lots of hand gestures when speaking, their long fingers dancing through the air as they explained complex ideas about their home planet's technology or philosophy. About 20 minutes into their meeting, Lisa noticed something that made her heart skip a beat. When Kale reached for their water glass, their sleeve pulled back slightly, revealing what looked like small, crystal-like bumps along their forearm. The formations were about the size of rice grains and seemed to catch the light in an unusual way. Lisa tried to focus on what Kale was saying about mineral trading agreements, but her scientist brain was racing. In all her studies of Veridonian physiology, she'd never seen anything like those formations. They looked almost like tiny gems growing right out of Kale's skin. "Ambassador," she said gently, trying to keep her voice casual, "I couldn't help but notice some changes in your appearance. Are you feeling all right?" Kale's blue eyes widened slightly, and they quickly pulled their sleeve down to cover their arm. "Oh, it is nothing to worry about, Dr. Martinez. It is simply a seasonal adaptation that my people experience. Very normal for us when we spend time in different climates." But Lisa had read every scientific paper about Veridonian biology that existed on Earth. She'd interviewed dozens of other ambassadors and visitors from Kel's planet over the years. Not one had ever mentioned seasonal adaptations that involved crystal-like growths on their skin. "I see," she said carefully. "Would you mind if I asked a few questions about this adaptation? For our medical records, of course, we want to make sure we're providing the best possible environment for you here." The look of panic that flashed across Kel's face was so quick that most people would have missed it. But Lisa caught it, and it told her everything she needed to know. Whatever was happening to Kale, it wasn't normal, and the ambassador was scared. "Perhaps we could discuss that another time," Kale said, their voice a little too bright and cheerful. "I believe we still have much to cover regarding the trade agreements today." Lisa decided not to push the subject, but she made a mental note to keep a closer eye on their visitor. Over the next hour, she noticed other small changes too. Kale seemed tired, more so than usual. Their normally perfect posture was slightly slumped, and they rubbed their temples several times as if fighting a headache. When their meeting ended, Kale stood up quickly, almost eagerly, as if they couldn't wait to get away. "Thank you for your time today, Dr. Martinez. I look forward to our next discussion. Of course, Ambassador, please don't hesitate to reach out if you need anything at all. My door is always open." After Kale left, Lisa sat alone in the meeting room for several minutes, staring at the spot where the ambassador had been sitting. Her gut told her that something serious was happening, something that Kale either couldn't or wouldn't talk about. The question was whether she should respect the ambassador's obvious desire for privacy, or trust her instincts as a scientist and friend. That evening, Lisa stayed late at the center. Going through her files on Veridonian biology, she cross-referenced every piece of information she had, looking for any mention of seasonal adaptations, crystal formations, or unusual physical changes. She found nothing that matched what she'd seen on Kel's arm. As she finally packed up her things to head home, Lisa made a decision. Tomorrow, she would pay closer attention to Kel's condition, not as a scientist studying an alien specimen, but as a friend who was genuinely worried about someone she cared about. Meanwhile, 3 floors above in the diplomatic quarters, Kale stood before a full-length mirror in their private bathroom, staring at their reflection with growing alarm. The crystal formations had spread. What had been just a few small bumps on their forearm that morning now covered most of their lower arm, and were beginning to appear on their shoulder. With shaking hands, Kale activated their secure communication device and sent an encrypted message across the vast distance of space to their home planet. The message was brief but desperate. The change has begun. I need immediate help. Please respond quickly. Hours passed before the reply came, and when it did, Kel's world crumbled. Extraction impossible at this time. Mission must continue. Do not reveal condition to humans. Maintain diplomatic relations at all costs. Kale sank onto their bed, feeling more alone than they had ever felt in their long life. They were trapped on an alien world, undergoing some kind of transformation they didn't understand. With no way home and no one to turn to for help, the only person who had seemed to notice was Dr. Martinez, and Kale could see the concern in her kind eyes. But how could they explain something they didn't understand themselves? How could they risk the carefully built trust between their 2 worlds by admitting that something was terribly wrong? As Kale tried to sleep that night, the crystal formations seemed to pulse gently with their heartbeat, and they couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of something much bigger and more frightening than they could imagine. 2 weeks had passed since Dr. Lisa Martinez first noticed the strange crystal formations on Ambassador Kel's arm. What started as tiny bumps had now grown into something that looked almost beautiful. If it wasn't so terrifying, the crystals covered most of Kel's arms and had begun spreading across their chest. Like a slow-moving constellation, Lisa had been keeping a careful eye on the ambassador during their daily meetings. She'd started calling them wellness checks to make them sound less formal and more like friendly visits. Each day, she brought coffee for herself and the special herbal tea that Kale enjoyed, hoping to create a relaxed atmosphere where the ambassador might feel comfortable opening up. But Kale was getting better at hiding the changes they now wore. Long-sleeved shirts buttoned all the way up to their neck. Even though the weather had been unusually warm, their movements had become more careful, more controlled, as if they were constantly thinking about how to position their body to avoid revealing anything unusual. What Lisa didn't know was that the crystals were doing much more than just changing Kel's appearance. Late at night, when the ambassador thought they were alone, the formations would begin to glow with a soft, pulsing light that seemed to match their heartbeat. The light was beautiful, but also deeply unsettling, especially since Kale had no idea what was causing it or what it meant. Even worse were the strange episodes that had started happening during the day. Kale would be in the middle of a conversation or reading a document, when suddenly their mind would fill with thoughts that didn't feel like their own. Random images would flash through their consciousness, memories of childhood pets, the taste of chocolate cake, the feeling of rain on skin. These weren't Kel's memories. They belonged to someone else entirely. The first time it happened during one of their meetings with Lisa. Kale nearly panicked. They were discussing Earth's agricultural exports when suddenly they could taste fresh strawberries, even though there were no strawberries anywhere in the room. The taste was so vivid and unexpected that Kale actually looked around in confusion. "Is everything all right, Ambassador?" Lisa asked, noticing the strange expression on Kel's face. "Yes, of course," Kale replied quickly, but their voice sounded uncertain. I was just thinking about something from home, Lisa nodded. But she could see that something had shaken the ambassador. Over the following days, these episodes became more frequent and more intense. Kale would suddenly know things they had no way of knowing, like the fact that Lisa had argued with her sister the night before, or that the security guard in the lobby was worried about his daughter's upcoming wedding. The most disturbing part was that these strange moments of knowing always seemed to happen when Kale was around humans, especially Lisa. It was as if the crystal formations were somehow picking up on the thoughts and feelings of the people nearby. During one particularly intense episode, Kale was reviewing trade documents when they suddenly felt a wave of concern wash over them. But it wasn't their own concern, it was Lisa's, somehow. Kale could sense that Lisa was worried about them, that she suspected something serious was wrong but was trying to be respectful and not push too hard for answers. Without thinking, Kale looked up from the documents and said, "You don't need to worry about me so much, Dr. Martinez. I know you're concerned, but I'm managing fine." The moment the words left their mouth, Kale realized their mistake. Lisa's eyes widened in surprise, and a look of shock crossed her face. "I didn't say anything about being worried," Lisa said slowly, her voice careful and measured. "How did you know I was thinking that?" The silence that followed felt like it lasted forever. Kale stared at Lisa, their mind racing to find some explanation that wouldn't reveal the truth about what was happening to them. But there was no reasonable explanation for how they could have known what Lisa was thinking. I suppose it was just obvious from your behavior," Kale said finally. But they both knew that wasn't a satisfactory answer. Lisa leaned forward in her chair, her expression serious but kind. "Ambassador, I've been studying your species for years, and I've never encountered anything like what I'm observing in you. These aren't normal seasonal adaptations, are they?" Kale felt their carefully constructed facade beginning to crumble. The urge to tell Lisa everything was almost overwhelming, but the strict orders from their home planet echoed in their mind. "Do not reveal condition to humans. Maintain diplomatic relations at all costs, Dr. Martinez," Kale said, their voice barely above a whisper. "There are some things that are difficult to explain, even between friends." "Try me," Lisa said gently. "I might understand more than you think." That night, alone in their quarters, Kale stood before their bathroom mirror again, studying the crystal formations that now covered nearly half of their body. The growths pulsed with that strange inner light, and as they watched, Kale could swear they saw patterns in the pulsing, like some kind of complex code or language they couldn't quite understand. They touched one of the larger crystals on their shoulder, and immediately their mind filled with a rush of sensations that weren't their own. They could feel Lisa's curiosity, her genuine care and concern, her scientific fascination mixed with personal worry. But they could also sense something else. Dozens of other minds in the building below, each with their own thoughts and feelings and concerns. The realization hit Kale like a physical blow. The crystals weren't just changing their appearance. They were somehow connecting their mind to the minds of the humans around them. They were becoming some kind of living receiver, picking up the mental broadcasts of everyone nearby. Kale sank down onto their bed, overwhelmed by the implications. If this continued, if the crystals kept growing and their abilities kept strengthening, how long would it be before they couldn't control it anymore? How long before they were drowning in the thoughts and feelings of every human within miles? And what would happen to the delicate peace between their worlds if Earth's governments discovered that their diplomatic guest had become a mind reader? The fear and suspicion it would create could destroy years of careful relationship building. For the first time since arriving on Earth, Kale felt truly desperate. They were changing into something they didn't understand, developing abilities that terrified them, and they had no one to turn to for help. The weight of keeping this secret was becoming unbearable, but the consequences of revealing it could be catastrophic. As they tried to sleep that night, the crystal formations continued their gentle pulsing, and Kale couldn't escape the feeling that whatever was happening to them was far from over. If anything, it felt like it was just beginning to accelerate. The crystal formations now covered more than half of Ambassador Kel's body, creating intricate patterns that looked like a living map of stars across their skin. What had started as small bumps had grown into elaborate geometric structures that pulsed with an inner light so bright that even thick clothing couldn't completely hide the glow. But the physical changes were nothing compared to what was happening inside Kel's mind. The strange episodes of picking up other people's thoughts had evolved into something much more overwhelming. Now, Kel could hear the mental chatter of every human within a 50-meter radius, like being trapped in a room where dozens of people were all talking at once. Walking through the Global Contact Center had become a nightmare. In the elevator, Kel would hear the operator thinking about his lunch plans. Passing by the reception desk, they'd pick up the secretary's worries about her son's grades. Even in their own quarters, they could sense the thoughts of the maintenance staff in the floors below, and the security guards making their rounds. The worst part was that Kel couldn't turn it off. The voices in their head were constant now, a never-ending stream of human consciousness that made it nearly impossible to focus on their own thoughts. They'd started wearing heavy headphones, pretending to listen to music from their home planet, just to have an excuse to avoid conversations that might reveal their condition. Dr. Lisa Martinez had noticed the changes. Of course, she was too observant and too caring to miss the signs. Kel had stopped coming to their regular meetings, claiming to be busy with reports for their home government. When they did interact, it was only through video calls, and even then, Kel kept the camera positioned so that only their face was visible. Lisa wasn't fooled. She could see the strain in Kel's expression, the way their eyes darted around as if they were listening to something she couldn't hear. The ambassador's responses had become delayed and sometimes didn't quite match the questions she was asking, as if Kel was distracted by something else entirely. The breaking point came on a Thursday afternoon when Lisa decided she'd waited long enough for Kel to come to her. She prepared what she called a cultural exchange session, really just an excuse to check on her friend in person. She brought along some Earth snacks and a few books about human art that she thought Kel might enjoy. When she knocked on the door to the ambassador's quarters, there was a long pause before Kel answered. When the door finally opened, Lisa was shocked by what she saw. Kel looked exhausted, with dark circles under their eyes and an almost frantic quality to their movements. Their clothing was bulky and ill-fitting, clearly chosen to hide rather than to look professional. "Dr. Martinez," Kel said, their voice strained, "I wasn't expecting you today. Perhaps we could schedule a video call for tomorrow instead?" But as Kel spoke, Lisa noticed something that made her heart race. There was a faint glow coming from beneath the ambassador's thick sweater, a soft light that pulsed in rhythm with their breathing. It was subtle, but unmistakable once she'd seen it. "Kel," Lisa said gently, using the ambassador's name without the formal title for the first time. "I'm not here as a scientist or a diplomat. I'm here as your friend, and I can see that you're in distress." For a moment, Kel's carefully maintained composure cracked. Their shoulders sagged, and Lisa could see the weight of whatever secret they'd been carrying alone. "You don't understand," Kel whispered, glancing nervously down the hallway. "There are things happening that I cannot explain, that I'm not supposed to explain. My government has been very clear about maintaining our image here on Earth." Lisa stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Whatever is happening to you, you don't have to face it alone. I've spent my entire career studying your species, and I care about you as an individual. Let me help." That's when it happened. As Lisa spoke those words with such genuine compassion, Kel's control slipped completely. The crystals beneath their clothing began pulsing more rapidly, and suddenly Kel was overwhelmed not just by Lisa's thoughts, but by her emotions too. They could feel her worry, her determination to help, her scientific curiosity mixed with personal affection. But it didn't stop there. Lisa's strong emotions seemed to amplify Kel's abilities, and suddenly they could sense everyone in the building. The security guard 3 floors down was thinking about calling his ex-wife, a janitor. In the basement was worried about his sick cat. A diplomat from the European division was frustrated with budget constraints. Kel stumbled backward, pressing their hands against their temples as the rush of foreign thoughts and feelings threatened to overwhelm them completely. The glow from their crystals became so bright that it was visible even through their heavy clothing. "I can hear them," Kale gasped, their voice filled with panic. "I can hear all of them. Their thoughts, their feelings, everything. It won't stop, Lisa. I can't make it stop." Lisa didn't hesitate. She stepped into Kel's quarters and quickly closed the door behind her, then guided the ambassador to a chair. She'd spent enough time in crisis situations to know that panic only made things worse. "Breathe," she said firmly but kindly. "Focus on my voice. Try to block out everything else and just listen to me." As Kale struggled to regain control, Lisa's mind was racing. Everything she was observing pointed to something unprecedented in all her years of studying alien biology, the crystal formations, the apparent telepathic abilities, the physical and mental distress. This wasn't just unusual. It was completely outside anything documented about Kel's species. "How long has this been happening?" Lisa asked once Kel's breathing had steadied slightly. "Weeks," Kale admitted, their voice barely audible. "It started small, just occasional flashes of other people's thoughts, but it's been getting stronger. Every day. Today is the worst it's ever been." Lisa looked at her friend with a mixture of scientific fascination and deep concern. "Kale, I need you to know that whatever is happening to you, we'll figure it out together. But I also need you to be honest with me. Does your government know about this?" The look of anguish that crossed Kel's face told Lisa everything she needed to know. "They know," Kale whispered. "They know, and they've ordered me to hide it. They're afraid of what humans will think. If they discover that one of us has developed the ability to read minds, they think it will destroy the trust between our peoples." "And what do you think?" Lisa asked. Kale was quiet for a long moment, and when they spoke, their voice was filled with a sadness that broke Lisa's heart. "I think I'm losing myself, Lisa. Every day, there are more voices in my head, more thoughts that aren't my own. Sometimes I can't tell the difference between what I'm thinking and what someone else is thinking. I'm scared that if this continues, there won't be anything left of me at all." Lisa reached out and gently took Kel's hand, noticing how warm it felt, as if the crystals were generating their own heat. "That's not going to happen," she said with quiet determination. "We're going to find a way to help you control this, and we're going to do it together." For the first time in weeks, Kale felt a spark of hope. But as they looked at Lisa's kind, determined face, they couldn't shake the feeling that accepting her help might put both of them in danger. Their government had been clear about the consequences of revealing their condition, and Lisa's career, maybe even her safety, could be at risk if she became involved. "You don't understand what you're offering," Kale said softly. "If my people discover that you know about this, if Earth's governments find out that you've been helping me hide a telepathic alien, both of our lives could be destroyed." Lisa squeezed Kel's hand gently. "Then we'll just have to make sure we figure this out before anyone else finds out, won't we?" Dr. Lisa Martinez led Ambassador Kale through the quiet corridors of the Global Contact Center toward her private laboratory. It was well past midnight, and the building was nearly empty except for a few security guards making their rounds. Lisa had chosen this time carefully. Her lab was equipped with special signal-blocking walls that were designed to prevent any electronic surveillance, making it the safest place for a conversation that could change everything. Kale walked beside her like someone in a dream, still struggling to process the decision they'd just made. For weeks, they carried the weight of their transformation alone, following their government's strict orders to hide their condition at all costs. But the isolation had become unbearable, and Lisa's offer of help felt like a lifeline they desperately needed to grab. The laboratory was a comfortable space filled with scientific equipment, charts of alien biology covering the walls, and several cozy chairs arranged around a small table where Lisa often conducted interviews. She guided Kale to one of the chairs and quickly activated the room's privacy systems, ensuring that their conversation would remain completely confidential. "Take your time," Lisa said gently, settling into the chair across from Kale. "Whatever you need to tell me, I'm here to listen." Kale took a shaky breath and began to unbutton their heavy jacket as the fabric fell away. Lisa gasped softly. The crystal formations had grown far beyond what she'd imagined. They covered Kel's arms, chest, and shoulders in intricate patterns that looked like living artwork. Each crystal was perfectly formed, catching the laboratory's soft lighting and throwing it back in prismatic rainbows. But what was even more striking was the gentle glow emanating from within the crystals themselves. They pulsed with a rhythm that seemed to match Kel's heartbeat, creating an almost hypnotic light show across their skin. "They're beautiful," Lisa whispered. Her scientific mind immediately fascinated even as her heart ached for her friends. "Obvious distress? Beautiful and terrible," Kale replied, their voice heavy with emotion. "Dr. Martinez, Lisa, what I'm about to tell you goes against everything my people have taught me about interacting with other species. But I can't carry this burden alone anymore." Kale stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights below. "Every few generations, someone from my planet undergoes what we call the confluence. It's not a disease or a malfunction. It's an evolution, but one that my people fear above all else." Lisa leaned forward, her full attention focused on Kel's words. "What exactly is the confluence?" "It's when one of us becomes a bridge," Kale explained, turning back to face her. "The crystals you see aren't just growing on my skin. They're changing my entire nervous system, creating connections that shouldn't exist. I'm becoming something that can link the consciousness of different species together." The implications of what Kale was saying hit Lisa like a wave. "You mean the telepathic abilities you've been experiencing are just the beginning," Kale finished. "Right now, I can sense the thoughts and emotions of humans around me. But as the confluence progresses, the connection will become stronger and more permanent. Eventually, I won't just be reading minds. I'll be creating a direct mental link between human and Veridonian consciousness." Lisa sat back in her chair, trying to process the enormity of what she was hearing. "That's why your government doesn't want Earth to know about this. They're afraid of how humans would react to the idea of mental connections with aliens." Kale nodded, their expression filled with pain. "Imagine the fear and suspicion it would create. Humans would wonder if we'd been reading their minds all along, if our diplomatic relationships had been built on deception. And my people would be terrified that the mental connection might spread to our entire population. If I return home during the transformation, so they've abandoned you here," Lisa said, anger creeping into her voice. "They've left you to deal with this alone because it's politically inconvenient. They believe they're protecting both our species," Kale said quietly. "But yes, I'm alone. The medications they sent to try to stop the process didn't work. The environmental controls in my quarters have had no effect. Nothing has been able to halt or even slow down the confluence." Lisa stood up and began pacing, her mind racing through possibilities. "Tell me about the symptoms you're experiencing, everything, no matter how small or strange it might seem." Over the next hour, Kale described in detail what they'd been going through, the constant influx of other people's thoughts and emotions, the way the crystals seemed to respond to human proximity, glowing brighter and pulsing faster when people were nearby, the episodes where they'd lose track of which thoughts were their own and which belonged to others. "The worst part," Kale said, their voice barely above a whisper, "is that I can feel myself changing not just physically, but mentally too. Sometimes I find myself thinking in ways that feel more human than Veridonian. I'm starting to understand emotions and concepts that my species has never experienced. It's like I'm becoming a hybrid of both our peoples. And I don't know if there will be anything left of the original me when it's over." Lisa sat down across from Kale again, her expression thoughtful. "What if that's not necessarily a bad thing? What if instead of losing yourself, you're becoming something new? Something that could help both our species understand each other better?" "That's what terrifies my government the most," Kale replied. "They've spent centuries maintaining careful boundaries between different species. The idea of someone who could bridge those boundaries, who could create real understanding instead of just diplomatic cooperation, threatens everything they believe about how interspecies relationships should work." "But what do you believe?" Lisa asked, setting aside what your government wants or what Earth's leaders might think. What do you want to happen? Kale was quiet for a long time, and when they spoke, their voice was filled with a mixture of fear and hope. I want to understand what I'm becoming instead of just being afraid of it. I want to learn how to control these abilities instead of being overwhelmed by them. And I want to know that, if this transformation is permanent, I'll still be able to connect with others without putting them in danger. Lisa reached across the table and took Kel's hands in hers. The crystals felt warm and seemed to pulse more gently at her touch. Then that's what we're going to work toward. We're going to figure out how to help you navigate this transformation safely. But the risks, Kel protested, if anyone discovers what you're helping me with. Let me worry about that, Lisa said firmly. You've been carrying this burden alone for too long. Besides, I became a xenobiologist because I believe that understanding between species is worth fighting for. If you really are becoming a bridge between humans and Viridians, then helping you succeed might be the most important work I'll ever do. For the first time in weeks, Kale felt something other than fear and desperation, sitting in this quiet laboratory with someone who genuinely cared about their well-being and was willing to take risks to help them. They began to believe that maybe the confluence didn't have to be a curse. Maybe, with the right support and understanding, it could become something extraordinary. Where do we start? Kale asked. Lisa smiled, and Kale could sense her excitement and determination even without trying to read her thoughts. We start by learning everything we can about what's happening to you. We document every change, every new ability, every challenge you face. And then we figure out how to help you master this transformation instead of being mastered by it. As they began to plan their secret research, both of them knew they were embarking on a dangerous path that could change not just their own lives, but the relationship between their two worlds forever. The next 3 weeks changed everything for both Dr. Lisa Martinez and Ambassador Kale. Working together in secret during the late evening hours, they turned Lisa's laboratory into a research station dedicated to understanding the confluence. What they discovered amazed them both and gave them hope that Kel's transformation could be controlled rather than simply endured. The breakthrough came when Lisa suggested that Kale try focusing their telepathic abilities on just one person at a time instead of being overwhelmed by everyone nearby, using Lisa as a willing test subject. They began practicing what they called selective connection, the ability to tune into one person's thoughts while filtering out all the mental noise from others. It wasn't easy at first. Kale would sit across from Lisa in the quiet laboratory, trying to focus only on her thoughts while blocking out the minds of the security guards in the building and the few staff members working late shifts. But gradually, with Lisa's patience, coaching, and encouragement, Kale began to develop better control. The real surprise came when they realized that the connection worked both ways. When Kale focused on Lisa's mind, she could also sense some of Kale's thoughts and emotions. It was faint at first, like hearing a whisper from another room, but it grew stronger as they practiced together. This is incredible, Lisa said during one of their late-night sessions. You're not just reading minds. You're creating a genuine two-way mental bridge. I can actually feel what you're feeling right now. Kale nodded, their crystal formations glowing softly in the dim laboratory lighting. When I focus the connection on you, the overwhelming chaos in my head becomes manageable. It's like you're providing an anchor point that helps me stay centered. They began documenting everything meticulously. Lisa used her scientific training to record detailed observations of how the crystals responded to different situations, while Kale provided insights into the mental and emotional aspects of their transformation. Together, they developed techniques for managing the telepathic overflow and methods for establishing controlled mental connections. What fascinated Lisa most was how the crystals seemed to adapt based on Kale's emotional state and intentions. When Kale was calm and focused, the formations pulsed gently and created stable connections. When they were stressed or afraid, the crystals became chaotic and difficult to control. It's like they're responding to your mental discipline, Lisa observed. The more you understand and accept what's happening to you, the more cooperative the transformation becomes, but their secret research couldn't continue indefinitely. Both Earth's government and Kel's home planet were beginning to ask questions about the ambassador's reduced public appearances and the unusual energy readings coming from the Global Contact Center during late evening hours. The moment of truth came when Director Harrison from Earth's Diplomatic Commission arrived unannounced for an inspection, accompanied by a representative from Kel's government who had traveled across space specifically to check on the ambassador's condition. Lisa and Kale had been working in the laboratory when the building's security system alerted them to the unexpected visitors. They had perhaps 10 minutes before the official party reached the laboratory level. "We could hide everything," Lisa suggested quickly, moving toward the equipment they'd been using to monitor Kel's condition. But Kale stood still in the center of the room, their crystal formations pulsing with a steady, confident light. "No," they said firmly. "I'm tired of hiding. If we've learned anything over these past weeks, it's that understanding is better than fear." "Are you sure?" Lisa asked, her hand hovering over the controls that would shut down the research setup. Kale smiled, and Lisa could sense their calm determination through their mental connection. "We've proven that the confluence can be controlled and directed. We've shown that human Veridonian mental connections can be stable and beneficial. It's time to show both our governments what we've accomplished." When Director Harrison and the Veridonian representative entered the laboratory 20 minutes later, they found Lisa and Kale calmly sitting at their research station, surrounded by detailed charts and recordings of their work together. The Veridonian representative, an elderly diplomat named Council Member Thrin, took one look at Kel's transformed appearance and began speaking rapidly in their native language. Lisa couldn't understand the words, but through her connection with Kale, she could sense the representative's shock and fear. "Ambassador Kale," Director Harrison said slowly, staring at the crystal formations covering their diplomat's skin, "I think you have some explaining to do." Over the next 2 hours, Lisa and Kale presented their research to both representatives. They demonstrated the controlled mental connection they developed, showed how the telepathic abilities could be focused and directed, and explained the potential benefits of human Veridonian mental bridges for future diplomatic relations. "This is unprecedented," Council Member Thrin said finally, their voice filled with wonder despite their obvious concern. "The confluence has always been seen as a dangerous aberration to be prevented at all costs. But what you're showing us suggests it could be controlled and even beneficial." Director Harrison leaned back in his chair, clearly struggling to process everything he'd witnessed. "The implications for our diplomatic relationships are staggering. But I have to ask, how do we know this mental connection can't be used to manipulate or control human thoughts?" Lisa spoke up. "That's exactly what we've been testing. The connection we've established is completely voluntary and mutual. Neither of us can force thoughts or emotions on the other. It's more like having a very intimate conversation than any kind of mind control." Kale nodded in agreement. The crystals seemed to respond to intention and consent. Forced connections feel chaotic and unstable, while willing partnerships create harmony and understanding. The negotiations that followed were complex and sometimes heated. Both governments had legitimate concerns about the security and political implications of telepathic connections between species. But Lisa and Kel's research provided a foundation for moving forward safely. In the end, they reached an agreement that surprised everyone. Instead of trying to reverse or hide Kel's transformation, both governments agreed to support further research into the confluence. Kale would remain on Earth as the first official bridge ambassador, working with Lisa and a team of specialists from both worlds to develop protocols for safe human Veridonian mental connections. The crystal formations eventually stabilized into beautiful, symmetrical patterns across Kel's skin that pulsed gently with their emotions and intentions. Rather than being a source of fear or shame, they became a symbol of the new understanding between two species. Lisa continued working as Kel's research partner and closest friend, helping to train future bridge ambassadors and studying the long-term effects of interspecies mental connections. Their partnership became a model for how humans and Viridians could work together. with unprecedented intimacy and trust years later, when other species began showing interest in establishing their own diplomatic bridges with Earth. Lisa and Kale were there to guide the process. They learned that true understanding between different peoples required not just political agreements or cultural exchanges, but the courage to open their minds and hearts to genuinely alien ways of thinking. The confluence, which had once seemed like Kel's greatest curse, had become their greatest gift, not just to themselves, but to both their worlds. And it all started with a simple decision to trust a friend with a terrible secret, and the determination to find hope in the midst of fear. In their final joint report to both governments, they wrote, "The greatest discoveries in diplomacy come not from maintaining safe distances, but from finding the courage to bridge the gaps between different ways of understanding the universe." The confluence didn't make us less ourselves. It made us more than we ever imagined we could become.